Welcome to another Unmuted, and you're going to love our fiery, feisty guest today. She is doing a great job really calling out the media when they avoid talking about Hunter Biden or avoid talking about the origins of COVID-19 or avoid talking about the border or crime in the streets. And our guest is Tomi Lahren. She is a Fox News host and on Fox Nation. And I love her new book. It is Never Play Dead: How the Truth Makes You Unstoppable. And Tomi, I am thrilled to have you join us for Unmuted. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. And you know that I've been in Nashville, Tennessee for almost 2 years now. I'm glad to be finally in a great free red state with great representatives like yourself out there fighting the good fight for us. So I always appreciate being able to talk to my senator.
Well, we appreciate having you join our audience today for Unmuted. Let me ask you this. How is it that the American people can even begin to trust the media when they see them not delivering the news, but just giving opinions and saying that's the news?
Well, I think what's most frustrating to Americans, I think on both sides of the aisle, is that right now it seems like everything is so agenda driven. And we know that the agenda of a lot of the mainstream media is a leftist, progressive, radical agenda. And we're seeing it constantly. We even see it when they make up stories about our Supreme Court justices and they're infighting about masks. We know from their own mouths is not the case. So it seems to me that whether it comes to COVID or the border or it comes to our illustrious president's son, Hunter Biden, they cover what they want to cover. They make news where it doesn't exist, and they rely on whatever agenda of the day they're pushing, and that shapes their coverage. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to rely on our media as the fourth estate. You know, I always say, listen, if you're a commentator, I'm a commentator. I'm not a journalist, I'm a commentator. And if you're just forthright about your bias and you say, I have a political perspective and you're transparent about it, I have no issue with that. It's these so-called journalists masquerading as neutral and unbiased that they're clearly not, that most Americans are fed up with.
I think they are too. And you look at the coverage. One of the things I hear a lot from Tennesseans is the difference in the way the press covered President Trump and how they are now covering President Biden. What are you seeing on that front?
Well, listen, just the other day, we had our own Fox News Peter Doocy being called a pretty horrible name by our president, who we were told was presidential, told that we needed to elect him because our former president was unpresidential and lacked dignity and class. But I think we see from this president that he has an avoidance to speak to the media, to speak to the press. We saw at his press conference that he wanted to get out of the room as quickly as possible. He didn't want to answer questions, and the questions that he was pressed on, and there weren't many, he got visibly angry. But we saw with President Trump constantly being called an enemy of the media, being called dangerous. But this president seems far more aggressive to members of the media. It's just that they're in his camp and they're advocating for him, and he is the man that they brought into office. So they are really, really hesitant to criticize anything that he says or does.
And when you look at our vice president, what are you seeing on that front? Because it seems that she was supposed to be the border czar. She was supposed to be tending to election reforms. There are all these things that she was given to do, but it seems like not anything has actually come about.
It's one thing to be bad at your job or to do a poor job at the duties that you've been assigned. My biggest frustration with our vice president is that she refuses to do anything at all. She refuses to visit the actual border and see the crisis firsthand. Now, we know that she kind of goes around it. She talks about finding the root causes of all these things, and she talks a lot of talk. She seems more worried about her reputation, and I understand why, because it's going pretty poorly right now as far as that goes, as the optics of the administration. But she's not even working to take care of some of the issues that we've been complaining about. Just go to the border. If you still don't solve the problem, I don't expect you to. I don't expect your administration to have the will to solve the problem, but at least go down. She doesn't even have the consideration for the American people, the people that she supposedly represents, to even attempt at any of the jobs that she's been assigned.
Well, and I say she went to the border, but she went to the wrong address. She never quite made it down to that southern border. And, there's been all this talk about she was going to fight human trafficking. If she wanted to really build a legacy for herself, I think that she would focus on getting that wall built so that we could end a lot of this human trafficking, gangs, and sex trafficking of women and girls, and how that is affecting communities in our country.
But you think, as someone who claims to be an advocate for women, that would be a huge priority for her. And it could be a big win, and it could be a bipartisan issue, because we should all be against human and sex trafficking. Unfortunately, that's running rampant at our border right now. I've been to the border several times during the Trump administration. And I remember when things were bad optically down at the border, when Trump had his zero tolerance policies that were working and effective. But I remember the outcry from not only the media, but our politicians like Kamala Harris. When I spoke to Border Patrol, they had delegations that wanted to come down and tour it all the time because they considered it a crisis then. But now those same delegations of folks don't want to go down, don't want to visit, don't want to talk about it. Kamala Harris could spearhead that effort. She chooses not to, because it's easier to do nothing than to fail. And that is not what our vice president should be focused on. She should be focused on tackling the problems, even if it's not politically convenient for her.
Well, we would hope that at some point they will begin to focus on that border and help protect our nation's sovereignty and put the attention there that is needed to actually secure it and seal it, and implement the Remain in Mexico policy, which worked so well under President Trump. And they have just refused to do. I think last year, 267 people was the total that they had remain in Mexico out of 2 million people, which is astounding.
It truly is. And I know that you've been such an advocate for this issue and drawing attention to it. And we in Tennessee thank you, and the American public thanks you, because it's a problem not only for border cities, but we see it metastasizing into the rest of our country. I mean, just this past summer, we had those middle of the night Biden air flights landing in Middle Tennessee, dropping off God knows who, going to God knows where. And that's a huge problem. But I'm glad that you're drawing attention to it. I think, quite frankly, if I were to speculate, it's obvious that the Democrats, at least in my opinion, are making an effort to get as many illegal immigrants into this country as possible. And then we see them going out of their way to make sure that those individuals will be given some kind of amnesty, some kind of voting rights and privileges that should be reserved for American citizens. So I think that the two are very linked. Their fight for, making sure the border is not enforced, and their fight for what they deem election integrity and election reform. So I think we need to keep an eye on it, because these have implications long after the Biden administration, if they're successful.
You're so right about that. And the implications are going to be a generation's worth of implications. When you look at the DACA protocols, the arrival of gangs, cartels setting up businesses, the way crime has moved into our streets, people fleeing places like Los Angeles and New York City to try to get away from this. But what we do know is every town's a border town, and every state is a border state because of that open border. Tomi, I want to ask you, because we hear from so many young people who are looking at the issues and they want to get out there and they want to do something. And so many times they'll say to me, I want to be a commentator. I want to do something with a website. I want to help educate young people. What is your advice to young women that look at you and they see you as a role model and they say, I want to do my part to help?
Well, listen, you have to have incredibly thick skin. And I know that you know this better than anybody, especially when you're a conservative woman. We are targets for the left. Yeah. And so you have to have a thick skin. Not everyone's going to agree with you. And we don't want that. We don't want everyone to agree with us. We don't want them to placate to us. We want to have a voice, and we want to stand strong in that voice. But you have to have a very thick skin in this industry, and not only on the conservative side, but on both sides if you want to get into media. And I know that you know that as well. In politics, that's just something that you have to have built within you. You have to have a strong strong confidence in yourself and in your belief system. But another thing that I would tell young people that want to get involved and they're just not quite sure, every time that you silence yourself, every time that you effectively cancel your own opinions and ideas and beliefs because you're afraid of what other people are going to think, you're holding yourself back, and you're also holding back a movement. I believe that young people are far more conservative than the media and the Democrats would lead us to believe. But the problem is so many conservatives feel like they have to whisper their beliefs and their convictions, and they're not proud of them. I always tell people, why are you so afraid of offending people who have no problem offending you? When is the last time a liberal ever had to whisper their beliefs or their ideals or their convictions? They don't. They scream it from the rooftops. And I admire that about the liberal left. I think as conservatives, we should stop being the silent majority and we should be the louder majority. And that would do a lot, especially for young people, and encouraging them to stand up for what they believe in.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And I think you're exactly right. I say all the time, we have to talk about what we are for in order to have people come work with us to stop these bad policies from the left. Well, people can find you on Fox Nation. They can also find you online at Tomi Lahren and get weekly updates and follow you. And of course, for our unmuted audience, you will find me at Marsha Blackburn. Tomi, we are just so proud of you and so grateful to have you join us today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the good fight. We need more women like you in high places fighting that good fight.
Thanks.